So is this the crisis of capitalism that Marxists have long been waiting for?
Well, Marx held that capitalism was crisis-prone all the time. And I think one of the things we have to do right now is to set this particular crisis in context. That actually over the last 30, 40 years there have been about hundreds of financial crises, some of them major. And after all, we went through our own long-term capital management crash in 1998, and we went through the savings and loan crash. So it's not as if this is new. The only thing this time is it's bigger, it's broader, and it's global. So I think we have to look at it as a crisis-prone system, but the crises have become more frequent and deeper over the last 30 years.
And what do you see as the genesis of the current crisis?
The main genesis actually arose out of the crisis of the 1970s, which was the last big one we really went through, when certain solutions were arrived at, which included pushing very hard to globalize everything and pushing very hard to use finance to do it. So, in a sense, we got the financialization of everything that occurred in the 1970s, and then that has taken off in its own way and produced the present mess.
And you have compared real estate bubbles to a sort of Ponzi scheme, which is something that's in the news now, a term because of the illegal work of Bernard Madoff. But explain the comparison and how you think it's played out here in New York.
I think two things about this. One is rich people got inestimably richer after the 1970s, mainly because of what we call wage repression. Real wages didn't rise. The rich got much richer, and then the question was, what were they going to invest in? Now, we're told it's good the rich get rich because they invest and they create jobs, but actually, a lot of the time they invest in assets, control of assets. They invest in the stock market. The stock market goes up, so they say, this is a good investment, let's invest more in the stock market. So by definition, the stock market has a Ponzi character. Same thing happens with property. You start investing in property prices go up, you invest more in property prices keep on going up. So actually, since the 1970s, a lot of investment has gone into control of assets rather than actually creating anything new in production.
Does the implosion that we're experiencing right now to some degree prove the trickle-down theory, whether you want to attribute it to Ronald Reagan or anybody else? Because a lot of money did trickle down into real estate and jobs and everything else, as measured by the fact that so many jobs are disappearing now that all that wealth, call it imaginary if you will, has gone away.
Well, trickle down is a sort of funny word. It assumes that wealth trickles down. Actually, what tends to happen is that the mass of the people who get employed, and you're right, we've had a reasonably full employment economy in the United States in the 1990s onwards, but the wage rates were very low, extremely low, and of course, as we know, the social protections were negligible. So it's not as if well-being trickled down. A certain kind of job structure was created, which was very low wage, very badly protected, which actually then produced goods which allowed the rich, if you like, to get even richer.
Building on what you were just saying, did the construction boom in New York simultaneously lead to foreclosure and to gentrification?
It led to gentrification first, and of course displacement by eminent domain and all those other kind of problems and the creation of homelessness. So it led to all of that, and now it's led, of course, to foreclosure. So we have the ridiculous situation, which was, I think, really highlighted in this morning's newspaper, of homeless people camping out in tents in Sacramento in the midst of a landscape where there are empty houses which have been foreclosed on. That is irrational, in my view, incredibly irrational. Home ownership has always been sold to the American people as a way of participating in the American dream, but it's also been a means of achieving stability, social stability. Since the 1930s, of course, home ownership has been pushed and pushed and pushed, and what we saw in the foreclosure stuff is that actually it got pushed down to levels where it was completely unreasonable to try to create it.
What's an alternative?
I think, well, the obvious alternative is renting, and I think that most people would be better off renting than they would owning. But I think actually there are other alternatives, like real co-op living, not the kind we have here in New York, but also social housing, which has a long history of actually being quite successful in many parts of the world.